The stars outside the ship's window were cold and silent, but the crew room was filled with nervous whispers. Everyone kept glancing at the tall metal doors that led to the meeting hall. No one wanted to be the first to enter. No one wanted to face her. The Alien Empress. People said she could bend metal with her voice. People said her eyes were sharp enough to see lies hidden inside the heart. People said she ruled 50 worlds with a will so strong that even black holes feared her. Whether any of that was true or not, one thing was certain. She was the most unpredictable ruler humanity had ever been forced to meet. At the center of this tension stood Dan, an ordinary diplomat's assistant who'd never expected to be part of a historic mission. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a scientist. He definitely wasn't the type of person chosen for dangerous negotiations. But the main diplomat had fallen sick during the trip, and now Dan was the only one left who knew the Empress's language well enough to speak to her directly. The commander had grabbed Dan by the shoulders that morning and said, "Just survive the meeting. Don't anger her." That was the whole plan. Dan didn't feel ready. His hands had been shaking since dawn. He kept telling himself he would just deliver the message, bow, and leave. Nothing more, nothing less. But fate rarely listens to human plans. When the metal doors finally opened, two tall guards with silver armor stood inside the hall. Their helmets were shaped like wings, and their weapons hummed with a quiet energy that made Dan's teeth vibrate. They did not speak. They simply nodded, guiding the humans inside. The meeting hall was enormous, so large that Dan felt as if he were walking into the center of a planet. Thick pillars, shaped like twisted vines, rose toward the high ceiling. Soft blue light floated in the air like mist. Every sound echoed, even the beating of Dan's heart. And at the very end of the hall sat the Empress. She rested on a throne carved from glowing stone. Her long cloak shimmered like liquid metal, shifting colors with every breath. Her posture was calm, but there was something powerful hidden behind that stillness, something ancient, heavy, and alive. Her face was not human, but not frightening either. Her features were sharp and elegant, like artwork shaped from starlight. Two thin marks glowed across her temples, pulsing softly. Her eyes were bright gold, watching everything and missing nothing. Dan froze, not because she was terrifying, but because she was strangely, unexpectedly beautiful. He didn't say it, of course. Nobody would dare. Humans had already heard too many warnings. Do not comment on the Empress's appearance. Do not disrespect her. Do not show fear. Do not show pride. Do not make sudden movements. Do not speak unless spoken to. It felt like every possible thing a person might do was already a mistake. The commander bowed and introduced their team. The Empress listened without changing her expression. Her voice, when she finally spoke, sounded like distant thunder rolling across metal mountains. "Where is your main diplomat?" "Sick, Your Majesty. This is Dan. He will speak in his place." The Empress turned her golden eyes toward him, and Dan felt the air around him tighten. He wished he could disappear into the floor. Approaching the first negotiation topic wasn't easy, but Dan managed to speak with a steady voice. He repeated the message he had practiced. He followed every rule exactly. He didn't add or remove a single word. The Empress listened silently. But then something unexpected happened. She stepped down from the throne, slowly, but with a presence that made the entire room go still. Her cloak drifted behind her like a living shadow. She approached Dan until she stood just a few steps away. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You fear me," she said, not as a question, but a fact. Dan swallowed. "Everyone does, Your Majesty." "And you?" she asked again. Dan's throat tightened. He didn't know why his voice betrayed him. Maybe it was the pressure, maybe it was fear. Maybe it was because he felt like lying would be pointless. She would see the truth anyway. Or maybe he just wanted to speak as a human, not as a diplomat. "No," he whispered. I don't fear you. I think you're beautiful." The entire hall went silent. The commander gasped. The guards' hands tightened on their weapons. Every human stood frozen, waiting for lightning to strike. The Empress did not move. Her eyes widened by a fraction, not anger, not insult, something else. Something no one expected. For the first time, the golden light in her eyes softened, and the galaxy began to change at that exact moment. The silence after Dan's words felt like a heavy blanket dropped over the whole room. Every breath, every heartbeat, every tiny sound seemed too loud. The commander looked ready to faint. The guards beside the Empress raised their weapons slightly, as if expecting an attack. But the Empress herself didn't move. She simply stared at Dan with an expression no one could understand. Not anger, not confusion, not pride. Something new. Something almost fragile. Dan expected to die. He expected a blast of power, or at least a command to throw him out of the hall. Instead, the Empress tilted her head slightly, studying him the way someone might study an unexpected puzzle piece. "You speak boldly," she said, at last, her voice low but steady. Dan froze. I meant no disrespect." "Disrespect?" The Empress stepped closer, and the blue mist around the hall rippled as if reacting to her energy. The commander looked ready to faint. The guards beside the Empress raised their weapons slightly, as if expecting an attack. But the Empress herself didn't move. She simply stared at Dan with an expression no one could understand. Not anger, not confusion, not pride. Something new, something almost fragile. Dan expected to die. He expected a blast of power, or at least a command to throw him out of the hall. Instead, the Empress tilted her head slightly, studying him the way someone might study an unexpected puzzle piece. "You speak boldly," she said, at last, her voice low but steady. Dan froze. I meant no disrespect." "Disrespect?" The Empress stepped closer, and the blue mist around the hall rippled as if reacting to her energy. "Your people fear my presence. They stand before me with shaking hands and guarded eyes, but you choose a different path." Dan didn't know what to say. He hadn't chosen anything. The words had simply slipped out of him like they were pulled by something he didn't understand. The Empress circled him slowly, studying him from every angle. Her cloak brushed lightly across the floor, leaving faint trails of silver light behind. Dan stayed perfectly still. He didn't want to make things worse. After a moment, the Empress stopped in front of him again. "What made you say such a thing?" she asked quietly. "Do you think beauty is a weapon, a trick, a shield?" Dan shook his head. "No, I just said what I saw." The Empress's eyes narrowed a little, but not in anger, almost as if she were testing him. "You saw beauty," she repeated. "Yes," Dan said softly. The Empress went silent. Her expression changed so slowly that no one noticed at first. The golden light in her eyes dimmed, then brightened again, not sharply, but warmly, like dawn rising over cold mountains. She stepped back and lifted her hand. The guards lowered their weapons instantly, as if she had spoken a command without words. The commander let out a shaky breath of relief. The Empress's voice echoed across the hall. "Leave us." The entire human team stiffened. The commander hesitated. "Your Majesty, with respect." "Leave," the Empress repeated, her tone calm but impossible to defy. The guards herded the humans out, except Dan. When the doors closed behind him, Dan realized he was standing alone with the Empress in the silent hall. His heartbeat felt like it was trying to escape his chest. She walked back to her throne but did not sit. Instead, she turned to him and spoke in a quieter tone, a tone Dan had never heard from her before. "No one has spoken to me like that in many cycles," she said. "Not even my own people." Dan blinked. "Why?" "Because I am the ruler of 50 worlds. Power makes others forget simple truth." She lifted her hand and traced the glowing marks on her temples. "They see strength. They see danger. They see command. They do not see me." Dan took a slow breath. Maybe they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. The Empress looked sharply at him. "And you? Are you not afraid?" Dan swallowed. "I was, but when I looked at you, I didn't feel fear. I only saw someone who looked strong and elegant and beautiful." The Empress's expression softened again, but she didn't hide it this time. Her shoulders relaxed just a little. Her eyes lowered, as if she were thinking deeply about something she had tried to ignore for a long time. "You speak with simplicity," she murmured. "Not as a diplomat, not as a warrior, not as someone trying to gain power." "I'm just being honest," Dan said. The Empress nodded slowly. "Honesty is rare." She walked to a small pedestal beside her throne and touched the surface. A soft light rose, forming a floating map of the galaxy. Stars and planets spun around her in gentle arcs. "My people stand on the edge of war. Humans fear us. We fear humans. Every meeting is filled with suspicion. But your words," she looked at him again, "your words have opened a door I did not expect anyone to open." I didn't know what that meant, but I felt the weight of it. "Dan," the Empress said softly, using his name for the first time, "your words have changed something inside me. And when something changes inside a ruler, the galaxy soon follows." Dan had no idea what that meant, but he knew one thing. This meeting was no longer just a negotiation. It was the beginning of something far bigger and far more dangerous than anyone expected.
Dan wasn't sure how long he stood there, frozen in front of the Empress. The floating galaxy map continued to circle slowly above the pedestal, bathing the hall in soft blue and gold light. It felt unreal, like he had stepped into a dream that didn't belong to him. The Empress lifted her hand, and the galaxy projection faded away. The hall dimmed slightly, leaving only the faint glow of the pillars. "You did not come here for politics," she said, turning back toward him. "You came because you were the only one left who understood my language." Dan nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty." "And yet," she added, "you spoke words no diplomat would dare to say." Dan rubbed the back of his neck, unsure what to do with his hands. "I really didn't plan it. The words just came out." The Empress walked slowly around her throne, thinking deeply. Her footsteps barely made a sound. Dan kept his eyes low, trying to stay respectful, but his mind was racing. Had he caused a problem for humanity? Had he created some dangerous misunderstanding? Or had he somehow done something right? The Empress stopped and looked at him again. "Your words changed the air around you. Even my guards felt it." Dan hesitated. "Was that bad?" "No," she said. "It was unexpected." Her eyes held a strange softness again, something he would have never imagined possible from the ruler of 50 worlds. Suddenly, the metal doors at the far end of the hall burst open. A tall alien soldier rushed inside, kneeling instantly with one fist to the floor. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption, but an urgent message arrived." The Empress's expression shifted back to her usual controlled form. "Speak." The soldier lifted a small crystal device. A faint light flickered inside it. "It is from the Council of Worlds," he said. "They request an immediate update regarding the human delegation. They fear the meeting may have gone poorly." Dan felt his stomach drop. Great, humans panicked first. Typical. The Empress did not show annoyance, but her eyes sharpened. They fear what they do not understand. She walked toward the soldier and touched the crystal. A gentle hum filled the room. As it activated, a hologram of several alien leaders appeared, floating above the soldier's hand. Each leader had different features: tall, short, scaled, smooth, feathered, but all shared the same expression: deep concern. One of them spoke. "Empress, we sensed a shift in the hall. Energy fluctuations. We feared danger." "There is no danger," the Empress replied calmly. "The human delegation is safe." "And the negotiation?" another leader asked. The Empress glanced at Dan, then back at the hologram. "It has taken a new direction." The leaders exchanged worried looks. "A new direction? Explain." The Empress straightened her posture, her golden eyes softened again. "Yes." The leaders whispered among themselves, their hologram forms flickering. Finally, the oldest among them said, "We trust your judgment, Empress, but be cautious. A single human should not influence the fate of worlds." Dan tensed. Fate of worlds. Me. That's ridiculous. The Empress, however, showed no fear. "She has already done so," she said, "and I will not ignore it." The council paused, then bowed their heads in agreement. The hologram faded, and the room grew quiet again. "I hope I didn't cause trouble." The Empress looked at him. "You caused change. There is a difference." She walked closer, leaving only a few steps between them. Dan felt her presence, strong but no longer overwhelming. "You spoke with honesty," she continued. "Such honesty carries weight. It can start wars or stop them." Dan's heart pounded. "I didn't mean to start anything." "Sometimes meaning does not matter," she replied gently. "Impact does." Dan looked down at his hands. "I just told you what I saw." The Empress lifted her chin, her golden eyes glowing softly. And in doing so, you reminded me of something important, something I lost long ago. What did you lose? Dan asked. Her voice dropped to a quiet whisper. Myself. Dan looked up, surprised. The Empress turned away, her cloak flowing behind her like a trail of silver water. Power demands mass. Rulers wear them for years, until they forget the face beneath. She paused. You looked at me and saw a person, not a throne. Dan's chest tightened. He hadn't known his words could touch her like that. The Empress took a long breath. I want to understand this honesty of yours, and I want you to understand my world in return. Dan blinked. How do I do that? She turned to him again, eyes glowing like small suns. By staying, she said firmly, you will remain on my world as my guest. Dan stumbled back a step. Stay? Here? With the Empire? Yes, the Empress said firmly. Your presence has already changed the galaxy more than you know. Now, you must learn why. Dan's mind spun. His team would panic. Humanity would panic. He wasn't trained for this. He wasn't even brave. He was just Dan. But the Empress had made her decision, and her decisions shaped worlds.
Dan didn't fully understand what had just happened. One moment, he was an assistant diplomat who barely survived his first alien meeting, and now the ruler of 50 worlds wanted him to stay in her empire. Not as a prisoner, not as a hostage, but as a guest. He swallowed hard. Your Majesty, I don't think humans will be comfortable with me staying here. The Empress looked at him with calm certainty. Humans will adapt, and your commander will return safely to explain. Dan felt like the floor under him was tilting. But I'm not important. I'm just... The Empress raised a hand gently. Your words made you important. He stopped. There was no arguing against her tone. It wasn't threatening. It was simply final. 2 guards stepped forward. Their armor shimmered faintly with blue light, and their posture was respectful instead of aggressive. One guard bowed slightly. Your Majesty, shall we prepare the guest quarters? The Empress nodded. Prepare the sky chamber. Both guards froze for half a second, clearly surprised. Dan had no idea what that meant, but it sounded like something incredibly important. The Empress turned back to him. You will stay in my personal wing. It is the safest place in the Empire. Dan blinked. Your personal wing? Yes, she said. If your presence changes the galaxy, then I must keep you near. Dan felt his throat go dry. Great. No pressure at all. The guards gestured for him to follow. Dan looked to the Empress, and she gave him a small nod. Not a command, but a signal that he was safe. Dan walked with the guards, and the huge metal doors slid open. His heart thudded in his chest. Before stepping out, he glanced back one more time. The Empress watched him leave with an expression he couldn't understand. Soft, thoughtful, and strangely human. The hallway outside the throne room was long and filled with glowing designs carved into the walls. Symbols Dan didn't recognize shifted slowly like living ink. When he passed by them, the shapes brightened for a moment, reacting to his presence. One guard noticed his confusion. The walls read energy, the guard explained. They sense emotion and adjust light patterns to calm guests. Oh, Dan said. That's cool. The guards exchanged a quick glance. They weren't used to humans reacting so casually. They guided him through several corridors, each more impressive than the last. Some hallways were filled with floating platforms instead of floors. Others had windows showing enormous alien cities far below, sparkling like jeweled seas. Dan pressed closer to the glass, amazed. This place is huge, beautiful even. The guards didn't reply, but he noticed one of them tilt his head slightly. Maybe compliments weren't common here. Eventually, they stopped in front of a tall door made of shimmering metal. It opened with a soft sound, revealing a spacious room that looked like a mix between a royal chamber and a peaceful garden. The ceiling was transparent, showing the open sky, swirling stars and glowing clouds drifting across it like slow rivers of light. The walls had plants that glowed faintly, hanging like floating vines. A soft, warm breeze moved through the room even though no windows were open. Dan stood there speechless. "This is for me?" "Yes," one guard replied. "This is the Sky Chamber. Only her most trusted guests stay here." Dan blinked quickly. "I'm not sure I qualify as most trusted." The second guard spoke for the first time. "The Empress believes you do." Dan didn't know what to say. His mind refused to process the idea that the ruler of 50 worlds trusted him, a human assistant who tripped over his own words. The guards bowed lightly. "If you need anything, call us through the panel by the doorway." Then they left, the door closing quietly behind them. Dan finally stepped further into the room, his feet sinking into the soft floor. A bed that looked like it was made of cloud material rested near the center. A table shaped like smooth stone floated a few inches above the ground. Everything felt warm and calm, like the room itself was alive. He sat on the edge of the bed. The cushion adjusted under his weight, forming perfectly around him. "Okay," he whispered to himself. "This is insane. I'm living in an alien palace." He lay back and stared up at the sky ceiling. A cluster of bright stars shifted slowly, forming a gentle spiral directly above him. He let out a long breath. What did I even do? Just said she was beautiful? And that somehow changed the galaxy? He covered his face with both hands. Great. No pressure at all. He heard the soft sound of footsteps approaching the door. Dan stood up quickly. The door opened, and the Empress stepped inside. Her cloak had been removed, and she wore lighter royal garments made of smooth silver fabric. Without the heavy armor-like attire, she looked even more elegant, and even more real. Dan jumped to his feet. "Your Majesty, I didn't expect—" She raised a hand to quiet him. "This is your room now. You do not need to fear my presence here." Dan swallowed. "Right. Sorry." The Empress walked slowly toward him, her golden eyes studying him with quiet curiosity. "I came to speak, alone," she said. Dan felt his heartbeat speed up. "About what?" She stopped only a few steps from him. "About why your words changed everything." The Empress stood only a short distance from Dan, her expression calm but unreadable. The soft lights of the sky chamber reflected off her silver clothing, making her look almost like a figure carved from moonlight. Dan felt strangely aware of how close she was. She wasn't intimidating him, yet her presence filled the room like quiet thunder. "You asked why your words changed everything," she said softly. "I will explain, but you must listen without fear." Dan nodded. "I'm listening." The Empress moved to the center of the room and touched a small crystal on the table. A gentle wave of light spread across the walls. The vines glowing on the walls dimmed slightly, as if giving the two of them privacy. "You asked why your words," she said softly. "You did more than speak a compliment." Dan frowned slightly. "I didn't mean anything political, I swear." She gave a faint smile, small but real. "I know. That is why it mattered." Dan blinked. I don't understand." The Empress lowered her gaze briefly, as if remembering something heavy. "For many years, leaders, warriors, and ambassadors stood before me. They spoke with fear, or they spoke with desire for power. or they spoke with pride. She looked up again. No one spoke with honesty. Dan crossed his arms unconsciously. So they all lied? Not always, she said, but they hid their true thoughts. They hid themselves, and I learned to do the same. Her eyes softened, turning from sharp gold to warm amber. For half my life, no one looked at me as anything more than a ruler, a symbol, a force, a weapon, even my own people. Dan's breath caught in his throat. That sounds lonely. The Empress didn't react at first, but the faint trembling of her fingers told the truth she didn't say. Yes, she whispered, it is lonely. The sky chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the distant lights. And then, she said, you looked at me, not the throne, not the crown, not the power. Me. She walked a little closer, her voice lowering. You spoke one simple truth, a truth no one risked saying, a truth without hidden meaning. Dan felt his chest warm slightly. He had only said what he felt, but now he understood why it mattered so much to her. The Empress looked directly into his eyes. In my world, she said, honesty is more rare than stars. Dan rubbed the back of his neck. I think where I come from, we're just used to saying what we feel. That is why your kind is unpredictable, she said, and why you are dangerous. Dan blinked quickly. Dangerous? She nodded. Honesty breaks walls that power cannot touch. You broke one of mine. Dan felt his pulse quicken. He didn't like the idea of breaking anything inside someone so powerful. I didn't mean to. You did not break me, she interrupted. You freed me. Dan froze. The Empress continued before he could speak. When you said those words, for the first time in many years, I remembered that I am not only a ruler, I am a person. Her voice trembled just slightly on the last word. Dan took a small breath. Everyone deserves to feel like a person, even rulers. The Empress stared at him for a long moment. Her expression wasn't cold or fierce. It was gentle, open, almost vulnerable. Your honesty is powerful enough to shift the course of trees and alliances. Humans have done this throughout history. You do it naturally. I'm not a strategist or anything, Dan said with a nervous laugh. I was scared. I just said the truth. And the truth, she replied, is the strongest force in the galaxy. She walked past him and sat on a small hovering chair, her movements calm and graceful. She invited Dan to sit across from her. He hesitated, but she nodded firmly. You are my guest. You may sit in my presence. Dan sat. The table between them glowed as the Empress activated another projection. A soft image formed, a swirling star cluster with 3 glowing marks. This is the border between our worlds. It is unstable. Tensions grow every day. Dan leaned closer. Is it war? It could be, she said, unless something changes. And you think I changed something? The Empress nodded slowly. Your words opened a new path, a path of trust. Dan shifted awkwardly. I'm not sure I know how to be responsible for something this big. You do not need to be a leader, she said. You only need to be yourself. Dan blinked. That's it? That is enough. Outside the sky ceiling, a cluster of stars drifted past like flowing rivers of white fire. The Empress looked at them, then back at him. Dan, she said softly, you changed me, and anything that changes a ruler will soon change the galaxy. Dan's heartbeat slowed, but not with fear, with something else, something he couldn't name yet. The Empress stood. I want you to remain here, not as a prisoner, not as a hostage, but as someone who awakened something in me I thought was long gone. What did I awaken? She turned, golden eyes glowing softly. Hope. Dan sat there quietly as her last word hung in the air like a soft light. Hope. It didn't sound dramatic. It didn't sound political. It sounded personal, and that scared him more than anything else so far. The Empress walked toward the transparent wall where the sky shimmered above the sky chamber. Stars flowed across it like drifting lanterns. Her posture was tall and strong, but her hands were folded gently in front of her like she was thinking deeply. Dan stood slowly. He couldn't just sit while she spoke like that. "Your Majesty, I don't know if I can live up to what you're expecting." She didn't turn around immediately. "You do not need to." "But you said I changed you. I didn't even do anything. I don't have special training. I don't know alien politics. I can barely keep my voice steady." She turned around sharply, her eyes firm. "Then, you did more than any trained diplomat ever has." "How?" he asked helplessly. "Because they speak to my crown. You spoke to me." Dan felt a heavy but warm pressure in his chest. He'd never expected someone so powerful to say something like that. The Empress walked closer again, stopping only a few steps away. "I have been shaped by duties and wars since I was young. Every leader I met taught me to guard my emotions, hide my fears, bury my identity." She touched the faint glowing marks on her temples. They pulsed gently beneath her fingers. "My people believe a ruler must be like iron, unbending, unfeeling." She lowered her hand. "But you looked at me not as iron, but as a person." Dan swallowed. "Anyone can see that." "No," she said softly. "Most never try." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Only the soft hum of the room filled the space between them. The Empress looked at Dan with a new expression, one that carried warmth, but also determination. "I cannot let this moment pass. Your honesty may be the bridge that prevents war. If humans and my people can understand each other even a little more, peace becomes possible." Dan scratched the back of his head nervously. I really not sure anyone should rely on me for intergalactic peace." She smiled faintly. "And yet, you already started it." The sky chamber lights dimmed slightly as she approached the floating table again. With a gesture, she projected another map, this one showing 2 clusters of planets on opposite ends, glowing in different colors. Lines of tension flickered between them like strands of lightning. "This is where our borders press against each other, and this is where the greatest misunderstanding lies." Dan stepped closer, studying the image. "They look so close." "Yes, close enough for fear, close enough for miscommunication, and close enough for hope." The Empress looked at Dan for a long moment. "Yes." Dan felt something shift inside him, a strange mix of responsibility and curiosity. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but he was here now, and the Empress seemed to believe in him more than he believed in himself. The Empress walked toward a smaller side door. "Come," she said. "There is something you must see." Dan followed her into a narrow corridor glowing with soft green lights. At the end of the path was another chamber, smaller but filled with floating screens and swirling holograms. Symbols drifted across the air like glowing feathers. "This is the heart chamber," she explained. "It holds memories of our empire, our victories, our losses, our mistakes." Dan stepped inside carefully. It felt sacred, like he was walking into someone's private diary. The Empress touched one of the screens and a series of images flickered to life. Battles in space, collapsing cities, crying families hiding under energy shields. "These," she said, are the scars of our past, and humans have their own. Dan nodded slowly. Both sides suffered. Yes, and fear grew from that suffering. She looked at him again, her voice quieter now, but when you spoke those honest words, they reached deeper than diplomacy. They reached me. Another screen lit up, showing recent political messages, harsh warnings, defensive plans, lists of demands. Dan's stomach tightened. They expect war. Yes, but if I change my approach, if I show them that I have changed, everything shifts. Dan took a breath. And you want me to help with that? Yes, but not as a tool, as someone who can show my people and yours that truth and respect are stronger than fear. Dan looked at the swirling holograms around them. Then he looked at her golden eyes steady, her voice calm, but carrying a quiet hope she had never allowed herself to feel before. Your Majesty, he said slowly, I'll try. I don't know if I'm the right person, but I'll try. The Empress stepped closer, her voice soft. You already are. Suddenly, the screen behind her flashed red. A warning symbol appeared. Dan tensed. What's happening? The Empress turned quickly. A human warship has entered our border space, and they are demanding your immediate return. Dan's heart dropped. Everything was about to change again. The warning symbol pulsed bright red, filling the heart chamber with flashes of sharp light. Dan felt his stomach twist as the Empress stepped forward, her expression returning to the focused, commanding look she wore in the throne room. But there was a difference now. Something warmer behind her eyes. Something human. She tapped the screen, and a large projection expanded in front of them, showing a massive human warship hovering near the border. Its engines glowed bright blue, and its weapons were already charged. Dan felt a cold shiver run down his spine. That's one of ours. But it's a battleship. Why would they send that? They fear for you, the Empress said quietly. And fear makes humans dangerous. Dan let out a shaky breath. Fear makes your people dangerous too. Yes, which is why this moment will decide everything. A sudden beep echoed through the chamber. They are requesting a direct communication, she added. Dan swallowed hard. They want to talk to you? No. She looked at him seriously. They want to talk to you. Dan's mind went blank. Him? Why him? He wasn't a commander or a strategist. He wasn't even supposed to be on this mission. But now the galaxy was watching him like he was the center of it. The Empress touched the communication crystal, and a large projection shifted in front of them, showing a massive human warship hovering near the border. Its engines glowed bright blue, and its weapons were already charged. Dan felt a cold shiver run down his spine. That's one of ours, but it's a battleship. Why would they send that? Dan, thank the stars you are alive. We didn't hear from your team. We thought... The captain paused. Where are the others? They went back. I stayed behind. You what? The captain shouted. Are you being held hostage? Blink twice if you're in danger. Dan resisted the urge to laugh nervously. I'm not a hostage. I chose to stay behind. The captain froze. He clearly wasn't prepared for that answer. The Empress stepped into view beside Dan. The captain flinched. Human vessel, she said. Your man is unharmed. He is here as my guest. That's hard to believe, the captain replied sharply. Your empire has been preparing for conflict for years. And humans have done the same, she said. Dan stepped forward before things got worse. Captain, please listen. There was no attack, no threat. I'm safe. The captain clenched his jaw. Dan, Earth Command is demanding your return. If they don't see proof you're not in danger, they'll assume the worst. Yes. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Dan felt like two enormous worlds were pressing down on him from both sides. He looked at the Empress. She didn't speak, but her eyes told him she trusted him. She believed in him. And maybe he could believe in himself too. Dan turned back to the captain. Listen carefully. The Empress is not the enemy. She's trying to stop a war, not start one. The captain hesitated. That is hard to accept. It's the truth, Dan said firmly. I've seen her world, I've seen their history, and I've seen her trying to be more than a ruler who hides behind fear. He took a breath. She's a person. Like us. The captain blinked. The Empress slowly looked at Dan, surprised by his courage. Dan continued, stronger this time. If humans attack now, you'll destroy the first real chance for peace we've ever had. The captain's expression softened, even if only slightly. Dan, if we stand down, how do we know the Empire won't strike first? Dan looked at the Empress. She nodded once. A promise. Dan turned back. Because I'll stay here. If anything goes wrong, I'll be the first to know and the first to warn you. The captain stared at him for a long moment. Then he exhaled. Then, you're insane. A little bit, Dan said. The captain sighed. Fine. We'll stand down, but we'll stay close. And if anything feels wrong, we come back. That's fair, Dan said with relief. The projection faded. Dan turned slowly toward the Empress. Her golden eyes shone in a way he hadn't seen before. Not fierce, not distant, but warm. You defended us, she said. I defended peace, and you. A long silence passed between them, the kind that didn't need words. Then the Empress stepped closer, her voice gentle. Dan, you have changed more than you know. He looked around the sky chamber, then at her, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. I didn't do it alone. You listened. The Empress's expression softened like starlight melting into dawn. Perhaps this is the beginning of a new path for both outer worlds. I smiled faintly. And for us? The Empress's voice was quiet. For us as well. Outside the sky ceiling, a bright comet streaked across the stars, a sign of something rare, something hopeful. Dan watched it, realizing his life had changed forever. He wasn't just a diplomat's assistant anymore. He was the bridge between worlds. And everything changed because he spoke one honest truth.